It was a muggy afternoon in Ouagadougou in May 2025 when Ibrahim Traoré received a call that would change everything, Dr. Sarah. Mitchell, an American physician who had worked secretly in the White House, was on the other end of the line, her voice shaking with nervousness. President Traoré, I need to speak to you about something very serious concerning President Trump. Ibrahim stopped reviewing documents and listened intently. I am listening, doctor. I have medical evidence that shows that President Trump has been hiding a serious health condition from Americans. Documents that prove deliberate medical neglect during his campaign and now in office. Ibrahim frowned. Why are you telling me this, Dr. Mitchell? Because you are one of the few world leaders who is unafraid to tell the truth, regardless of the political consequences. These documents need to come to light, doctor. Ow. Mitchell explained that he had confidential medical records, lab tests, and recordings of conversations that showed a conspiracy to hide Trump's serious heart problems he suffered. 2 minor heart attacks during the 2024 campaign, but they were covered up. He revealed the medications he takes affect his judgment, but his medical team has been instructed to keep quiet. Ibrahim knew he was dealing with a political bombshell, doctor. These are very serious allegations. Are you sure they are true? I have all the evidence. I can send the documents to your embassy in Washington today. At that moment, Ibrahim realized he was holding information that could shake not only the United States, but the entire world. 2 hours after Dr. Mitchell's call, Ibrahim Traoré was meeting with his crisis cabinet at the presidential palace. The medical documents had arrived through secure diplomatic channels, and the gravity of the situation was undeniable. Mr. President said, Dago Alonso Dago, the foreign minister, if we make this public, it will be an unprecedented diplomatic crisis. Ibrahim studied the medical reports carefully. Abnormal electrocardiograms, elevated cardiac enzyme levels, prescriptions for heart failure medication, all dated October 2024, weeks before the election. The American people have a right to know about their president's health, Ibrahim said, but more importantly, his political decisions may be affected by medications that alter his thinking. Fatima Sawato, the economy minister, raised a concern. Mr. President, this could harm our trade relations with the United States. What if we keep quiet and he makes a disastrous military decision because of the drugs? Ibrahim replied. How many lives could be at risk? The young Burkina leader knew he was faced with a moral dilemma on one side, diplomatic stability on the other, the ethical responsibility to protect innocent lives. I will make this public, he finally decided, but we will do it the right way with all the evidence and in a respectful manner. Musaka Bori, his top aide, asked, how do you intend to do this? I will give an exclusive interview to CNN International live from Ouagadougou. Let the consequences come. The decision was made. Ibrahim Traoré had once again chosen truth over political expediency, even though he knew he would face the wrath of the most powerful government in the world. The next morning, news broke in Washington. Ibrahim Traoré had scheduled an exclusive interview with CNN to reveal critical information about President Trump's health. The White House was in a panic. Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old White House press secretary, was summoned to an emergency meeting. Karoline, the chief of staff, said, you need to hold a press conference before his interview. Discredit everything before he speaks. Karoline, known for her fierce loyalty to Trump, was visibly nervous. What kind of information could he have? We don't know for sure, but it could be related to the president's health. You need to attack Traoré's credibility immediately. In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim was in the makeshift studio at the presidential palace preparing for his interview with CNN's Christian Omanper. Medical documents were neatly arranged on the table, each page stamped and authenticated. President Traoré Omanper said during the audio check, are you prepared for the consequences of this revelation? Ibrahim smiled calmly. Dr. Omanper, when you know that lives may be at risk, there is no choice. It is a matter of conscience. At 2 o'clock p.m. Washington time, 8 o'clock p.m. in Ouagadougou, both broadcasts would take place simultaneously. Karoline Leavitt in the White House trying to discredit Ibrahim and the Burkina Bay president revealing the documents to the world America was about to experience. One of the most tense moments in its recent political history. Behind the scenes at the White House, aides were buzzing with aides trying to devise damage control strategies, while in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim maintained the calm and determination that had made him known worldwide at 200 p.m. Sharp Karoline Leavitt stepped up to the White House podium, her expression tense and unmistakable to press. Room was packed with journalists from around the world waiting for her to speak. "Good morning," Karoline began, her voice shaking slightly. "I am here to address the false allegations that will be made by the self-proclaimed president of Burkina Faso in a few minutes at NBC." Reporter interrupted. "Spokeswoman Leavitt, do you know what the specific allegations are?" Karoline hesitated, sweating. "Visibly, it doesn't matter what the allegations are. They are lies fabricated by an African regime seeking international attention." The next question came from Reuters. "But if you don't know what the allegations are, how can you say they are false?" "Because anything coming from Ibrahim Traoré is automatically suspect," Karoline replied, her voice rising. "He is a military dictator who came to power through a coup at that moment in aid." Whispered something in her ear. Ibrahim's interview had begun. On CNN, and the first revelations were coming out. Spokesperson. A CNN reporter asked, "Is President Trump aware of the medical claims that are now being made on television?" Karoline's face turned pale. What? What medical claims?" "Ibrahim Traoré is showing documents that suggest that President Trump suffered 2 heart attacks during the campaign and is taking medications that may affect his judgment." The room erupted in murmurs as Karoline gripped the podium, clearly losing control. This is a conspiracy, a blatant lie?" Her voice was growing hysterical. "How can you give credibility to an African terrorist?" Her choice of words was disastrous. Journalists began shouting questions simultaneously, and Karoline was visibly losing her composure. Meanwhile, in the Ouagadougou studio, Ibrahim Traoré maintained an impressive calm as he methodically presented each medical document to Kristana Manpur. "In the world, these are President Trump's electrocardiograms from October 15th, 2024, Ibrahim said, showing the papers to the camera. "They clearly show cardiac arrhythmias consistent with myocardial infection." Amana examined the documents. "President Sure, how did you obtain these confidential medical reports?" A courageous American doctor who served on the White House medical staff could no longer live with this lie. She risked her career and safety to bring the truth to light. Ibrahim showed another document. "This is a report from October 23rd, 5 days later. Elevated cardiac enzymes, clear evidence of damage to the heart muscle. And look here," he pointed to a prescription beta blockers and antiarrhythmic medications prescribed immediately afterward. The even bigger bombshell came next, but the most serious thing. Dr. Amanpour is these recordings. Ibrahim played an audio clip in which the voice of Trump's doctor could be clearly heard. "We can't reveal this now. If the public finds out he's had 2 heart attacks, the election is lost. Keep taking his medication. And pray he makes it until January." The global reaction was immediate. Trump health cover-up became a global trend in a matter of minutes in Washington. Chaos ensued. Democratic congressmen began calling for impeachment. Republicans demanded investigations into the leaking of medical information. Meanwhile, back at the White House, Karoline Leavitt was completely out of control, yelling at reporters and making increasingly absurd accusations against Ibrahim Traoré. The difference between the presidential composure of the young African leader and the hysteria of the American spokesperson could not have been more glaring. Back at the White House, Karoline Leavitt was in free fall. Questions from reporters were coming at her from all sides, and she clearly had no prepared answers for this crisis. "Spokeswoman Leavitt," shouted a Washington Post reporter, "is the audio we just heard on CNN legitimate? Was that the voice of Dr. Roberts, the president's personal physician?" Karoline was sweating profusely, her hands visibly shaking on the podium. I can't comment on the alleged recordings, but you just said it was all a lie." Another reporter insisted. "How do you know it's a lie if you can't comment?" "Because I know." Karoline exploded, shouting at the entire room. "You are all being manipulated by an African dictator who hates America." The room fell into shocked silence never had. A White House spokeswoman lost control in such a public and embarrassing way. An NBC reporter tried to ask another question, but Karoline interrupted him. "Enough, you want to destroy this country. You are all working with America's enemies." At that moment, CNN's Jim Esta asked the fatal question. "Spokesman, if these allegations are false, why isn't President Trump coming out publicly to deny them? Where is he now?" Karoline was completely paralyzed. Everyone knew that Trump had canceled all public appearances since he learned of Ibrahim's interview. The president is perfectly healthy, she shouted, but her voice cracked with despair. It's an international conspiracy led by Burkina Faso. The words sounded so absurd that some reporters laughed involuntarily. Karoline, realizing that she had completely lost credibility, gathered her papers with shaking hands and ran from the podium, leaving the press room in a state of total shock. It was the most humiliating end to a press conference in White House history. In the hours following Karoline Leavitt's collapse and Ibrahim Traoré's revelations, the political world was thrown into turmoil. In the U.S. Congress, Democratic representatives met in emergency session. Nancy Pelosi on the microphones. If these allegations are true, we are facing the greatest conspiracy against the American people in modern history in the Senate. Even moderate Republicans expressed concern, Mitt Romney declared. Regardless of party, the American people deserve to know the truth about their president's health. In Burkina Faso, Ibrahim remained calm in his palace, taking calls from world leaders. President Macron of France, Ibrahim, the evidence you have presented is irrefutable. France supports an international investigation. Putin of Russia was more blunt. You have done what none of us had the courage to do. You have exposed the weakness of the American empire. But the reaction that mattered most came from the American people themselves. On the streets of New York, protesters gathered with signs. Trump, show your medical records. In Washington, crowds marched toward the White House demanding transparency. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the doctor who leaked the documents, was interviewed by ABC News. I can't live with this lie any longer. The president has episodes of confusion caused by his medications. I've seen it happen during national security meetings. Wall Street reacted immediately. The Dow Jones plunged 800 points in 2 hours. International investors began to question American political stability in hospitals across the country. Cardiologists confirmed the authenticity of the leaked scans. Dr. Michael Chen, a Harvard cardiologist, these EKGs are consistent with a heart attack. There's no way to fake these changes. Meanwhile, Trump remained isolated in his private residence, canceling all public appearances. His medical team had been placed under federal investigation. The young president of Burkina Faso had achieved what the American opposition had failed to do in years: exposed the real vulnerability of power 3 days after the revelations. Washington was in unprecedented political chaos. The FBI had opened a formal investigation into the leaking of medical information, but also into the alleged conspiracy to conceal the president's health condition. Karoline Leavitt, after her public breakdown, had been removed from her duties and was undergoing psychiatric treatment. Her political career was in tatters in Ouagadougou. Ibrahim Traoré was giving another interview, this time to multiple networks simultaneously. I have no pleasure in exposing this information, he said calmly, but when the mental health of a leader with access to nuclear weapons is compromised, it becomes a matter of global security. The BBC journalist asked President, "Are you not afraid of retaliation from the United States?" Ibrahim smiled slightly. The truth does not fear retaliation, and frankly, they have bigger problems to deal with right now. In American hospitals, a wave of doctors began to demonstrate. Dr. Patricia Williams, former White House physician during the Obama administration, there is a strict protocol for concealing presidential health issues. What Traoré has exposed is just the tip of the iceberg. The pressure on Trump was mounting by the hour. Republican governors were beginning to demand clarification. The governor of Texas: if our president is sick, we need to know the governance of the country is at stake. At the White House, aides were working desperately to come up with a containment strategy, but each attempt to dismiss the evidence only made the situation worse. Dr. Roberts, Trump's personal physician, was called to testify before Congress under oath. He confirmed the authenticity of the documents. The president has suffered minor cardiac events, but he has remained functionally capable. The next question was devastating. Dr. Khan's prescription drugs affect judgment. A long pause. Yes, they can cause episodes of confusion and mood swings. It was the confirmation the country had been dreading to hear. A week after the revelations, the United States faced its biggest constitutional crisis since Watergate. Dozens of Democratic congressmen had signed on to an impeachment motion based not on crimes, but on medical unfitness to govern. Trump finally appeared in public, but his performance was disastrous during an interview on Fox News, he mixed up dates, called the President of China by the wrong name 3 times, and had a visible episode of disorientation. Global markets plummeted. The dollar lost 15% of its value in a week. Allied countries began to question military agreements with the United States. In Burkina Faso, Ibrahim watched the events unfold with a mixture of sadness and determination. I didn't want it to come to this, he told his wife Ajara, but I couldn't keep quiet knowing that millions of lives could be at risk. Ajara took his hand. You did the right thing. History will judge your actions. The turning point came when the vice president, acting under the 25th Amendment, called a cabinet meeting to discuss removing Trump on grounds of incapacity. 12 of the 15 cabinet members voted in favor. Trump resisted, but his own family convinced him to accept a temporary leave of absence for intensive medical treatment. In an 8-minute televised address, Trump announced that he would temporarily step down from the presidency to address health matters that have been kept private to protect national stability. It was an indirect admission that Ibrahim Traoré had been right on the American streets. Reactions were mixed. Some celebrated the transparency, others lamented the national humiliation, but one thing was clear. A young African president had forced the world's greatest power to confront a truth it did not want to accept. Ibrahim had changed the course of history simply by choosing courage over expediency. 3 months later, the world had changed irreversibly. Trump never returned to the presidency, opting to retire for health reasons. The vice president took over permanently, promising a new era of transparency and honesty. Karoline Leavitt had disappeared from public life, seeking treatment at a private clinic in California. Her emotional outburst at the White House became a case studying communication schools on how not to manage a crisis. In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré had become an even more respected figure globally. American universities invited him to lecture on moral courage and leadership. He always politely declined. My place is here, serving my people. The reform in the White House was profound. A new law was passed requiring annual public medical exams for presidents and full disclosure of any conditions that could affect their ability to govern. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the doctor who leaked the documents, was pardoned by the president and became a symbol of medical integrity. Sometimes, she said in an interview, doing the right thing means sacrificing your career. The impact on Africa was transformative. The continent gained new international respect. Ibrahim had proven that African leaders were not minor figures on the world stage, but moral voices that the world needed to hear. On a quiet afternoon in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim was walking through the palace gardens with his daughter. Daddy, why does everyone say you're a hero? The little girl asked. Ibrahim smiled. I'm not a hero, my dear. I just did what any conscious person should do. Tell the truth, even when it's difficult. A simple answer from a man who had shaken the world simply by being honest. Ibrahim Traoré had proven that sometimes great change begins with someone brave enough to speak when everyone else is silent, and that the truth, even from a small African country, always prevails over lies, even when protected by the greatest power in the world.